Councillor Robinson, you are now live on YouTube.
Good evening and welcome to the March Rushcliffe Cabinet meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the Cabinet meeting is actually being live streamed tonight on YouTube. Recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's website. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of such images or sound recordings are not under the Council's control. All participants are reminded that to ensure the audio for the meeting is as clear as possible, all microphones should be muted as a default setting to keep background noise to a minimum unless you're speaking. Finally, could I just ask all Cabinet members to confirm that I can see and I can hear them? Councillor Upton.
Yes, Councillor Robinson, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor English.
Yeah, I can confirm I can hear and see you.
Councillor Brennan.
Yes, I can confirm that too.
Could I also then check with officers? Ms. Sull.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Mrs. Marriott.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Ms. Ashmore.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Mr. Banks.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. And Mr. Linfield.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
And Mrs. Tambini, we can hear you.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Lovely, thank you very much. We also have two councillors in attendance, opposition group leaders. So could I just ask Councillor Gray, please, just to acknowledge that you can hear us.
I can see and hear you.
Thank you. And also Councillor Way.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. So I'd also just like to remind Cabinet members to raise your hands if you actually wish to speak this evening. In respect of voting, I will ask for councillors who wish to abstain or vote against an item to raise their hand first. If no councillor indicates, then we'll take it the item actually being carried. So without any further ado, I'd like to move forward with the agenda. Could I have apologies for absence, Ms. Tambini, please?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Edavine.
Thank you very much. Any declaration of interest? Okay, thank you. Could I have I propose the minutes of the meeting 9th of February 2021? If I propose that we accept those minutes, do I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second those, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Anybody wish to object or abstain to one of those minutes? So those minutes are carried. Thank you very much indeed. Citizens' questions, Mrs. Tambini. We have no.
There are no citizens' questions this evening.
Okay, so we'll go straight on to the opposition group leaders' questions. If I could start, please, with Councillor Gray to ask your question.
Good evening, all. My question is, given that outside of this meeting, some may not be inclined to read Cabinet papers, but may read other papers with headlines such as nuclear option for Nottingham. How will the Council communicate and explain the risks and benefits of Rushcliffe potentially becoming the home to an experimental nuclear fusion reactor?
Yeah, thanks to Councillor Gray. Obviously, first, just to say that it's still a Cabinet item. We haven't actually voted on the item yet. And of course, even if we do, it will the landowner whether they actually go forward with their expression of interest. Should it actually go forward, then there certainly will be a comprehensive programme of communication with the landowners, Nottinghamshire County Council and the Atomic Research Agency, all contributing to that communication, particularly with the residents and also with the parish councils who are around that area. It is a very complex subject. We appreciate it is very sensitive. There are an awful lot of issues out there, but we have the commitment that should this item actually go forward and the expression of interest go forward, then there will be a very, very extensive period of communication and consultation with all the communities in the area. Do you have a second question, Councillor Gray?
Yes, yes, please. Just on that. So What external sources do you think we would also communicate with? Again, given that some of the people you might have mentioned may have other interests for this going ahead. You know, would we then speak to universities, other groups, those sorts of things?
Well, as I mentioned, obviously the primary sort of mover on this is the Atomic Research Agency. So I think it's very important that they are a major influence on this. As you quite rightly say, we're also within Nottinghamshire. We do have a lot of academics, and I think it was very important that they also contribute. Also, we should note that there are other sites as well in Nottinghamshire. But as I said in the original question there, Councillor Gray, the County Council will be coordinating any expression of interest. And obviously, we'll be looking with them to coordinate and perhaps bring in some external expertise, knowledge, and certainly experience on what we appreciate is a very, very complicated topic.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Could we move forward then, please, to Councillor Way to ask your question?
Gosh, can't find the video thing. Hang on a second.
Is that the question?
No. Found it. Yes, thank you. Good evening. We're pleased to see that there's a recommendation for the inclusion of guidance within a supplementary planning document to provide consistency to future open space schemes. This will prove useful in future for residents of new developments to have a greater degree of certainty about what they will need to pay and what will be provided for that fee. Hopefully this will also give them some help support if the companies do not comply with the agreements, as seems often to be the case. It would be helpful if transparency is encouraged in terms of who has access to the open spaces. This is causing problems between residents and non-residents as to what constitutes public and private land and tends to result in divided communities. We also welcome the recommendation to write to the Secretary of State regarding this matter. One of the issues of concern is that the management companies are expanding these charges to cover much more than open spaces. For example, one local resident moved to a house where there's an open space management company and his seller was charged £250 for a seller's pack, obligatory that was, and the buyer £450 to change the owner's name on their records. It would appear that this is not unusual, although charges vary. We've seen examples of lists of charges where residents, despite being freeholders, have to ask permission to management companies to sell their houses. Inevitably, there's a fee. These imposed management agreements allow for additional charges to be made to residents for items such as dealing with fly tipping, and most do not have a cap on how much they increase. Paragraph 3.1 of the officer report states there should be parity across states within the borough. Hopefully, there will be parity within the estates themselves. In estates with mixed tenure housing, it's possible some residents will carry a larger burden than others, and this will only become clear with detailed examination. For residents living in affordable housing, be it social rent, affordable rent, or shared ownership, these additional charges can impose an unsustainable financial burden. In order to try to halt the continuation of unnecessary additional charges on households under the guise of open space management, the letter to the Secretary of State should include all the above issues. Will the supplementary planning document and the draft letter to the Secretary for State come back to the scrutiny group for comment?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Way, for quite a comprehensive question. The points you make in your question are well made and understood and will be considered for inclusion in my letter to the Secretary of State and the proposed supplementary planning document. But neither will go back to the scrutiny group. The special planning document will go to the local development forum and then to Cabinet. And a copy of my letter to the Secretary of State will be circulated to the LDF group. I'll be giving more information on this subject area in item 7 later this evening. Have you a second question, Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Upton. Would you be willing to discuss with me the information that I've found during my research into this topic before finalising the letter to the Secretary of State?
Yes, always ready to listen to information. No problem. Perhaps you could email it to me or give me a ring.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Way. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is the revenue and capital budget monitoring for 2021 financial and COVID update for quarter 3. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Over the last year, the quarterly budget monitoring, which I report on every quarter, these reports have not really been showing a very healthy picture due to the impact of COVID, and you've heard me talk about it many times. At the last reporting cabinet, we were showing a £244,000 deficit due primarily to reductions in income and additional support costs, particularly leisure, much of which has been detailed in previous reports, and I don't intend to repeat. At the same time, management have done well here. They've made some very good cost savings, notably on staff efficiencies, additional income from new investments, reduction in events costs, and additional garden waste income, all to be commended in this difficult time. Now I have some good news, which is unusual at the moment. The government has supported us with additional income relating to council tax losses and losses from our leisure facilities. This very welcome support from the government has enabled a quarter 3 to move from a deficit of 244,000 to a projected positive position of 721,000. This positive position will help replenish the organisational stabilisation reserve so that the council has the resources to meet any further MTFS budget deficits and any other risks going forward, particularly given the ongoing uncertainty of the impact of COVID. This again stresses, as you've heard me say many times, that as a council we are prepared with sufficient reserves to weather any future crises. Now, going to our capital budget, there is an underspend of 7.3 million, primarily due to small delays in the Bingham project and uncommitted funds in the asset investment strategy. By the way, the asset investment strategy provision is now being removed. Special expenses, particularly West Bridgford, has also been impacted by COVID, but is eligible for limited government support. This deficit amounts to £87,000, which will be repaid by a loan, and this was agreed at the last SIL and special expenses meeting in December, and will be subject to a special budget workshop review later in the year. Overall, considering the pandemic we've been through, this is a much more positive report than I have previously given. And I hope with the return to some normality, this is continued for the next quarter. As Peter Linkfield keeps telling me, we will not rest on our laurels as challenges will remain going forward. That's his bit, not mine. So I'm very happy to move the following recommendations as stated in the Cabinet paper. It's recommended that the Cabinet approve the attached report noting the expected net revenue efficiency for the year of 721,000, the capital budget efficiencies of 7.3 million, and the expected outturn position for special expenses of £87,000 deficit. Thank you. That's my report for tonight, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Yes, well, I'm very happy to second this report. As Councillor Moore has indicated, there is scope for optimism in this budget update, and prudent and efficient management of the council's budget has meant that although we, like everybody else, every other organisation, has had to weather a very difficult year, we came into this pandemic crisis on a solid footing with a balanced portfolio of expenditure, income and investments. We've continued to deliver on our priorities, including significant capital investment programme, and we've been able to project budgets allocated to key areas for us, such as climate change. As Councillor Moore has said, government support and in-house efficiencies have moved the position from one of a quarter 3 deficit to a healthy positive position this quarter. We'll continue the prudent management that has characterised our record on managing our budgets, and look to replenish our reserves where possible to ensure that we're well placed to respond in future should the pandemic situation deteriorate, which hopefully it will not. And as Councillor Moore says, the national picture is improving, and hopefully it will continue to do so as the economy cautiously reopens. This is a more positive budget report than one might have expected, and I'm very happy to second the recommendations as set out in the paper and moved by Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments at all? No? Okay. Thank you. I think it is really important that we're getting these quarterly reports through. This takes us to the end of December, will it be, won't it?
Yes.
It will be, end of December, yeah. So obviously this quarter will be quite interesting in terms of obviously some of the government announcements as we look at further grants. But I think it sort of reflects, doesn't it, still at this point, the need really to be very, very careful with our finances as we come out of this. We said right from day one, we're very pleased that we came into this pandemic with a very robust financial structures and resilience. This has proved to be the case, but we mustn't, as Mr. Linfield says, we mustn't lessen our laurels, and it is very important that we keep this analysis and our focus on this. So a recommendation set out by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Do I have any objections or anybody wish to abstain on this item? No? So that item is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, management of open spaces in new developments. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. Over the last few decades, there has been a distinct national trend, I think, of housing developments having a different estate layout to the more traditional layouts that were common in the 19th and 20th centuries, where houses were typically built facing a road and very little, if any, public open space within those developments. But times have changed, and now we have many new developments, especially the larger sites, which have significant areas of public open space, surface water, ponds, playgrounds, private roads, car parks, street lighting, whatever. When these new estates layouts began to appear, many local councils took over the maintenance and costs of these communal areas, but some were run by management companies set up by the developer. Indeed, the first house I purchased in Rushcliffe back in 1975 was subject to having shares in just such a management company. So I have some experience of this firsthand. But increasingly, the cost to councils of taking on responsibility for these communal areas became prohibitive. And the majority of councils, I believe, including Rushcliffe, developed a policy of not taking on any more of them, but leaving the responsibility to the estate management companies. Now, estate management companies have varied reputations, and there are also a number of issues around who should use the communal land, and these are detailed in this report. The fees charged by estate management companies can and do vary significantly, and there are concerns from residents about the lack of control over price rises, involvement in an ability to change the management company, and the quality of the services that they provide. There is also an issue about residents paying for the maintenance of communal areas, but the public being given free access to adjoin them at no cost. Development Scrutiny Group asked officers to investigate these issues, and their findings are the substance of this report. Although this council does require an open space scheme to be developments of 11 or more dwellings, it cannot get involved in the process of setting up estate management companies. Essentially, there is a recommendation that we draft and adopt a new supplementary planning document, as indeed some other councils have already done, which sets out the standards we want to see for the management and maintenance of open spaces on new housing developments. I stress this would not be retrospective. This would allow our planning officers to try and negotiate a greater degree of consistency for the maintenance and the management of these communal areas that I refer to across all new developments, and hopefully a better parity of fees. But At present, we have no legal powers to dictate which management company must be used or the prices they can charge for their services. And we have no powers to get involved with disputes over price increases, hidden costs, etc. And these are matters that will require a change in national legislation. This is that there is a recommendation in this report that I, if you like, write to the Secretary of State to highlight these issues and to request guidance to address them. So, to conclude, I propose the recommendations at item 2 of the report, namely, A, Cabinet support the inclusion of guidance within a new supplementary planning document, an SPD, to provide consistency to future open space schemes. And secondly, B, the portfolio holder for housing and planning writes a letter to the Secretary of State highlighting these issues raised and recommends they bring forward guidance to address issues identified. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you. I'm very happy to second this report. It's very important. And I was very pleased to see this come to be considered by the Growth and Transformation Scrutiny Group, which I believe Councillor Way, who asked the question earlier, brought to the attention of the group. And she's been quite dogged in her determination to get this matter considered. And I think it's a really important one. It's clear that many people across the borough are likely to be living in new developments that benefit from communal and shared open space, and they will, as a consequence, be contributing to its upkeep and maintenance, most likely through management companies. We do know that some residents have expressed concerns about the pricing and protections in these management company contracts, and quite rightly have expressed concerns about the scope for ongoing or uncapped price increases. And also, in some cases, which was also touched on earlier, perceived unfairness in some cases of contributing to large, attractive open spaces which bring in visitors from outside the local area to use that resource for free. It's timely, therefore, as housing continues to grow across the borough and for all the reasons that Councillor Upton has outlined, that we examine this issue. As Councillor Upton has said, we've no legal powers to intervene in the establishment or ongoing relationship with management companies. And as in-house council capacity is not there to maintain these open spaces ourselves, it's right that we look at what influence we can bring to bear on this through the planning process and other means to ensure consistency and fairness in the arrangements. As Councillor Upton has said, the Scrutiny Group has recommended that we draft and adopt a supplementary planning document in relation to open spaces, and that he should write to the Secretary of State highlighting the issues and seeking guidance to address them. And of course, he's offered to take on the views of research undertaken by Councillor Way as well. So on that basis, I'm very happy to support those recommendations as set out in the paper.
Thank you very much indeed. Any comments at all on this paper? Really? I think it is a fair reflection of concerns right across the borough as we build up these the larger sites with the management companies. I remember many years ago we had the issues with Bovis. I think it was Gamston, wasn't it? And all the issues that have been going on for many years, and huge amounts of green land that how was that going to be maintained? And that, I know that triggered a lot of discussions, and I'm glad that this has now been brought forward. Of course, one of the major issues is when not when the first house was bought, it's when they're resold, of course, because then that then triggers all sorts of clauses that perhaps people didn't know about, and some pretty difficult surprises in terms of taking over. But I think, as Councillor Upton said, this isn't just a problem with Rushcliffe, it's right across the country. I think it's very important that we do make this stand and these comments to the Secretary of State, and we look at perhaps some guidance for him and legislation that could help bring the standards up and make sure we get some conformity and some proper legislation that will assist. So any other comments at all? No? In which case then, if we could then take forward those recommendations by Councillor Upton as set out in the papers, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Anybody who would wish to abstain, or anybody who wishes to object to those recommendations? No. Excellent, thank you very much. So they are carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to item 8, which is the Ed Walton Golf Course Strategic Review, which comes under my portfolio. I just want to start with this paper just to remind Cabinet members that it's a very important responsibility of this authority to ensure that we regularly review all our assets, be it land, be it all our properties, all our facilities, to make sure that we are getting value for money for the taxpayer, and also they are serving the needs of our communities. And in reality, that's the introduction to this paper as regards Edwalton Golf Club. And feedback going back in January 2020 is that we had concerns about the usage of the course and, of course, the income to our partners there at Lex, who have invested a lot of money, as we have, in the facility. And these concerns were being expressed to us, particularly, as I say, in the usage of the actual site itself. So, and a recommendation from that Cabinet meeting back in January 2020 was to commission a report by KKP, who are specialists in leisure, to do that report. There were 2 stages to the actual report they were requested to do, and that was to look at the needs of golf, but also then to look at some options in terms of the actual site itself. Now, those that report then went to the sorry, I beg your pardon. In terms of the report, I think they're actually set out on page 52, section 5. And I'll just mention those before I talk about the scrutiny. And just summarising what those report gave us about keeping the 9-hole course, developing the driving range, improving the clubhouse, and some sort of master planning exercise for the potential of some housing actually on the site itself. That is a summary. Obviously, it was a very comprehensive report. A lot of research was done in that. They talked to a lot of people in terms of getting their input, and looked at the whole area to come up with those key points that I mentioned there, that are set out there on page 52. These, as I was going to mention, went to the scrutiny group in January, the community scrutiny group, and they agreed to that it couldn't continue in its current form because of the cost to the taxpayer. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, that was one of the major concerns that originally flagged. The scrutiny group also then agreed that further work was needed for master planning. But they made a very, very important message that golf should be retained on the site, particularly not just to play, but also in the driving range capacity and the offering that we could put through the driving range as well. So this paper really is just taking forward those recommendations. As I said at the start, this is an absolutely key asset for the community and also for the borough as a whole. But it's very important that we maximise the value of this site, both for our communities and for Rushcliffe. So consequently, based on the report coming to us, I'd like to move the recommendations that are set out on page 51, and that is that we acknowledge the feedback from the community scrutiny group, which includes the endorsement of golf need at Edwalton Golf Course. And recommendation B is that we allocate the utilisation of 50,000 of 2020-21 projected in-year budget efficiencies to undertake a further detailed technical risk assessment of the site, and thereafter a further 250,000 for further master planning work, assuming the risks identified are not prohibitive, so that realistic and deliverable master plan can be achieved for this site. So I'd like to move those recommendations, and I'll ask for a seconder, please. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, well-managed organisations regularly review their property assets and their associated costs. And as a winning entrepreneurial council, this is what we do. Edwalton Golf Course is a significant for this council, but for some time it's made an average yearly loss of around £44,000, which has to be covered by a revenue subsidy. The current business model for the golf course is not viable. Change is needed. is both, I think, pragmatic and certainly timely with its recommendations to move forward. I always believe change is inevitable, and we embrace it. The dinosaurs become extinct. As Councillor Robinson said, some option appraisal work has already been done by a specialist leisure consultant, which identifies a continuing demand for golf at Ed Walton and suggests some investments in the asset to make it more commercially viable. And this has been considered, as you say, by the Community Scrutiny Group. But before this investment is made, a technical risk assessment of the site and a detailed master plan clearly should be produced. This is essentially what this report recommends. I'm happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments at all that anyone would like to make on this on this paper? Okay, I think as Catherine Upton said, these are very, very good reports that were actually done, and these are obviously major sort of topic for discussion. We appreciate how sensitive this site is, but as we've stressed, it is very important that we make maximum use of this facility, and we go into this recommendation and this report with an open mind. And as you say, we see from a technical point of view what is possible on the site. I am very pleased that it has been recognised that it does offer an important golf facility, but it also appreciate that it may need tailoring to meet the demands of today's golfers, which have changed considerably, not just recently, but throughout the pandemic. Hence, I think the reflection of the driving range, but we also appreciate the community hall facility there as well, in an area where we don't really have much in terms of community facilities. So again, I think they're all reflected very well in this report, and I look forward to seeing the further reports brought back to this cabinet as we go forward. So if no other comments, I'd like to, so I've moved those recommendations as I set out there, seconded by Councillor Upton. Anybody who wishes to abstain or against taking those recommendations forward? No. So they're all carried unanimously. So moving now to the next item. This is the use of fireworks at Borough Council events. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, in March 2020, Council resolved to examine our use of fireworks. The Community Scrutiny Group looked at the issue in some detail, and it considered the use of fireworks at our own council events and our role potentially as an influencer more widely in terms of organised events and private firework events. Most people enjoy fireworks, and for many, the loud bangs and whistles and noises are part of the thrill of a firework festival. But I think we all recognise that the use of fireworks has expanded over time. A couple of decades back, certainly in my lifetime, you would only hear fireworks really one night a year on bonfire night. And that was it. But over time, of course, the use of fireworks has become now much more widespread. It's used on many occasions: New Year's Eve, weddings, birthdays, and so on. And this year-round use and the unpredictable nature of the use of fireworks has led to a number of representations from organisations acting on behalf of individuals or groups who find, for a range of reasons, the excessive noise of some modern fireworks can be quite stressful and frightening. And this includes groups such as the following, but not limited to: people with sensory disorders, some people on the autistic spectrum, people who are hypersensitive to noise, and some people suffering from dementia or PTSD. Many of these groups find the sudden and unpredictable nature of firework noise to be quite stressful. The RSPCA has also been running a campaign for quite some time to raise awareness of the stress and anxiety caused to domestic and wild animals by fireworks, and is also seeking the compulsory licensing for public firework displays. So this is not about being a killjoy, but it is about recognising that the more frequent use of loud fireworks in particular can have a detrimental impact on communities in a range of ways. As the Borough Council itself, we only use fireworks at one event a year, and that's the Christmas light switch on, which is usually held in West Bridgford. It's worth noting to date that we haven't had any complaints about the noise created on that occasion, but the community scrutiny group asked officers to consider options. We could choose not to use fireworks at all at any council event, and we could look at some of the modern alternatives, such as the use of laser light shows. However, they require a particular kind of venue to bounce the laser light shows off, and they can be quite costly, up to a third more than your traditional firework displays. And most people would, I think, miss the traditional display, and quieter fireworks are a good option, and it seems to me a fair compromise. Therefore, Cabinet is being asked to agree to discontinue the use of loud fireworks at our council events. The quieter ones are not generally more expensive than their noisier cousins, and they can be equally impressive in their use of colour and the kind of patterns and displays that they can generate. We're also being asked to consider running a public relations campaign to encourage others, both organised and at private events, to switch to using quieter fireworks where possible. And they are increasingly available at high street outlets and in the major supermarkets. Therefore, I would like us to consider and move to approve the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor English.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as Councillor Brennan's outlined, a lot of people do enjoy the loudness of fireworks, especially that intensity at the finales. I do myself, but a lot of people is not inclusive. Whilst people can expect noise, they can actually plan and make any necessary steps to minimise that impact on them for published fireworks events. But that still doesn't negate all the issues that affect the loud noises that cause on members of the community. Our pets, farm and wild animals, they've got no control or expectations. As I said, Rushcliffe only holds one event where fireworks are used, and I think there's a definite and traditional desire to continue using them at that event. It boiled down to asking myself one question: will it actually affect my life or anybody else's life if fireworks are quieter? And that's no, of course it won't. But will it benefit others if they are quieter? And that is yes. So I would support and second the proposal that live fireworks are discontinued. And hopefully that'll set a precedence in the borough for other organisers to adopt. Now, I do have concerns to the random use of domestic fireworks throughout the rest of the year, because they're unexpected. They can cause panic, shock, and even cause to emergency services. So I do welcome and support a campaign as in 2B, even suggesting that silent fireworks are only used, even legislated for non-traditional dates and for non-organised events. So I'm happy to second that move.
Thank you. Any other comments at all? Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I think the point for me, and I mean, we don't want to appear to be a killjoy, but the point for me is the second bit that the two councillors spoke about, is unexpected fireworks. I think on bonfire night, we know it's coming and people can take care of their animals, put the children's earplugs in or whatever. We know it's coming. We know it's coming at our Christmas event. I think the annoying thing for me, and we had it fairly recently near where I live, somebody decided to hold a loud firework display at 11 o'clock at night to celebrate a certain birthday, which caused an awful lot of trouble with the neighbours. So I really do support this side of this that said, yeah, fireworks fine for big events. Everybody knows they're coming. Everybody knows it's happening. But in between, no, thank you. That's all I've got to say on it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think, yeah, undeniably, I think the second part of this recommendation is possibly going to be more important. Is influencing behaviour, isn't it? That's out there throughout the year, and stop some of these spontaneous firework displays, which can cause quite a lot of distress, particularly for animals. And we see that at quite a few events, don't we? Sometimes where these firework displays. So absolutely, that we should do everything as a council ourselves for what we are in control of. But let's absolutely make sure that we do start to influence behaviour right across the borough, and we educate through every means that we can. Okay, so taking forward those recommendations by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor English. All those who would like to object or abstain, if you could show, please. No. That's carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to item 10, final item this evening. This is the government call for STEP sites. Quite an unusual item, one since I've been a councillor. I don't think we've ever discussed anything of this sort of magnitude or technology. 2019, BEIS, the government department, decided to allocate £220 million towards looking at the concept of STEP, which stands for Spherical Tokamak for Energy Production. Again, trying to look really forward to how we're going to create energy in the future. Particularly important part of that was actually commercially viable energy from actual fusion. Furthermore, in November 2020, BEIS issued a call for expressions of interest across the country and notified key authorities all around the UK to see if, and landowners to see if there were any sites that people would actually like to put forward. It also issued criteria in that expression of interest. This item has been brought tonight because we have been asked to support an expression of interest for the Radcliffe-on-Soar power station, which we all know is due to be decommissioned by 2025 and is currently obviously coal-fired. I think the key question tonight is, what is fusion? And that is set out in point 4.6. I'm going to summarise it because it's way beyond my means to express tonight the detail of exactly what fusion is, but it's the light nuclear fuse the light nuclear fuse to a heavy nuclear fuse, which releases energy. I know this is done by extreme temperatures, as hot as the sun, and of course we also, as you'll see in the report, it also drives the stars as well. But this huge temperature that it sets against a much lower temperature, which causes this fusion. The benefits are set out in item 4.8, and of course a key angle of this, of what the government is desperately trying to push technology towards, and that is a much, much greener energy source. There are no carbon emissions from this fusion process, and there in fact are no other environmental emissions from the process either. So its green credentials are extremely high. Obviously, it's not 100% green, but it certainly is a massive improvement than current generations of energy. What I think we have to appreciate as an authority in the Cabinet tonight, that this is a very, very controversial subject. We appreciate that. And there's also a lot of opinion about this topic. But I think what we all recognise and we all appreciate that as a country, we have got to find new sources of energy as we go forward. Safety is obviously utmost in everybody's mind, and we have to accept that nothing is 100% safe. But the majority of experts, and I say the majority, not all, are of the opinion that this is very, very safe technology. And I quote from the report in front of you tonight, that a large-scale nuclear accident is not possible. As regards the suitability of Radcliffe-on-Soar to host the STEP project, those requirements are set out in item 4.3. I won't go through them all, but I think many people who know the site will appreciate, just by their own knowledge and seeing the site itself, is access to the grid. Obviously, as a power station, it has substantial infrastructure to fulfill that. Access to a major water source, of course, it's right by the Trent there, and you've got the cooling towers as well. And of course, transport links obviously are very important with the airport, the motorway, and of course, the train station there. So actually, Radcliffe-on-Soar ticks an awful lot of the boxes that have been set out as the requirement for the STEP project. It's worth noting that the expression of interest will be led by the county council and the landowner. It's also being promoted and supported by the Local Enterprise Partnership. So we are being asked tonight to support at a very, very early stage of the process an expression of interest. I also should remind members that although we are looking to support it or not support it tonight, it is not in our gift to actually lodge that expression of interest. And whether it goes forward or doesn't go forward, ultimately will also be up to the landowner themselves, which is Uniper in this case. This is a non-binding expression of interest. So this isn't a contract to build to go ahead. It is an expression of interest which will then create a whole path of procedures which are set out actually in the report itself that's actually in front of you. So that's the paper that we bring tonight, and I would just very simply like to move that recommendation that's set out there in item 2, which is recommended that this cabinet endorses in principle the submission of an expression of interest for the Radcliffe-on-Soar site to become one of several sites being put forward in the East Midlands to the STEP programme. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor English.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As you said earlier, it's not just the country that needs to be looking forward, the whole world needs to be looking forward. We need to be looking at these innovative technology needs. They need to be explored for some new and fully sustainable green and efficient energy production. STEP is one of those projects, and it does have some amazing claims. It is receiving substantial investment in order to bring the concept to a viable solution. So tonight's report is not about the pros and cons of fusion energy production. It's a consideration of the possibility of Rushcliffe being involved from the outset in world-leading technology as an expression of interest, which is obviously timely to the 2025 decommission of the Radcliffe-on-Soar power station site. This site does score highly in all the aspects of the nomination requirements that will be required by the Secretary of State at the end of the month as a potential site against others around the county and the country. I do feel it's an exciting project, but there is a long way to go. It was mentioned in the questions at the beginning of the meeting of what there is to go forward, but we do need the landowner's consent before such a project can move forward. I think it would be unwise to dismiss this at such an early stage. It's got huge potential towards local employment, economic growth and global environment benefits. So all the necessary discussion and consultations will of course take place should the site be selected for the next stage of the government plan towards their 2040 target. As the decision is non-binding at this stage, I support the recommendation and second the move in principle as of item 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor English. Any other comments that anybody would like to make? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Yes, we know this is a difficult and controversial subject. And a lot of people talk about the need to improve changes in behaviour in response to the climate challenge that we all face. But if we don't innovate and we don't look for scientific and technological solutions to our dependence on fossil fuels, then we will never achieve our targets, we will never reduce our carbon footprint, and we will certainly never move to zero carbon. So although I recognise all the issues that have been said and fully understand that it's not a binding decision, this is very much the first stage of an exploratory process. I think getting in, understanding how the science can work and looking for solutions through this route is the route forward for us. So I'm happy to support the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Moore.
In my long career in the energy industry, one of my first jobs was bringing in natural gas and marketing natural gas into UK. And that was very controversial. That was a new product. Everybody wanted the old gas works and everything else, but that was proven, it worked, and now we have it. 15 years ago, nobody had heard of a photovoltaic panel, and really nobody had heard of a wind turbine. These are new technologies which are coming along and supplying an awful lot of energy. As Councillor Gray said, this is still unproven technology. I've been reading about it. There's a huge amount of work going on all over the world. Because if this works, it really is the holy grail for supplying energy to the world relatively cheaply. It's basically the sun, and that's how it works. So we have an opportunity here with this site to take away, I mean, this proposal, the size of it, to put it in perspective, is just under 3% of the size of the current coal-fired power station, which I think gobbles up, when it's working flat out, 800 tons of coals an hour. So we have a possibility here, and we're looking long term, to turn this into an amazing green site, environmentally friendly area with some state-of-the-art technology. And I'm very much in support of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I think just a point I'd just like to make before we take it to the vote. Councillor Brennan just said it is the start of a long process. You'll see in the report, I think the construction of the power plant would be scheduled for around 2040, which is an awful long way off. But we know with these projects, you've got to start them at some time. So it is very important. I think the government has recognised that they really just need to move forward as quickly as possible. I think we shouldn't underestimate the other benefits of a site like this in terms of research, in terms of the jobs it's going to create, the investment it would bring to Rushcliffe. One of the big things, of course, would be the academic work and the incredible high-skilled jobs as well for a site like this. I think the other point I'd just obviously like to make, that we are very familiar with site. We currently have a development corporation around there as well, and of course we're very excited by the announcements last week that it has actually been granted as part of the Freeport. This potential STEP project would take about 100 hectares. The site is about 260 hectares, so it would take up just over a third, isn't it, of the actual site itself. But this is one of many options considered for this site as well. And as I stress, the ultimate decision will be with the private landowner, which is Uniper. Councillor Upton, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chairman. I just wanted to reinforce the point that we will definitely need significantly more energy as we move to a more electricity. Understand it. This step has many green credentials. And this is just an expression of interest in what could be a world-leading technology. And as you said, I think it's a non-binding position at the moment. So I will vote for it.
Thank you. I think the last thing just to say, just referring to the question that Councillor Gray asked at the start of the Cabinet meeting, if the expression does go ahead, then we have a commitment that we need to do a lot of communication with our partners, really basically to explain the technologies and the whole proposal going forward. And that has to be part of a very, very intensive communication strategy, because there is huge sensitivity around this, and this council certainly appreciates that it is very, very controversial, and we need to be incredibly careful how we actually move forward this in terms of communications. So I've moved that recommendation as set out there in item 2. It's been seconded by Councillor English. Anybody wish to object or abstain? No? That recommendation is then carried unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the meeting for tonight. Thank you very much indeed for your time.